The morning sun crept over the rolling hills of Dry Hollow like warm honey spilling across the land. Wagons rattled, church bells tolled faintly in the distance, and a dry wind rustled the brittle grass outside the railway station as a lone figure stepped down from the stagecoach, clutching a single suitcase and a folded letter worn from too much reading. Clara Belle Thatcher stood on the dusty platform, brushing trail dust from the hem of her gray traveling dress. She looked around at the sleepy little frontier town with a mixture of hope and hidden fear. Her eyes lingered on the cracked wooden sign swinging above the general store, the sheriff's office with its crooked roof, and the modest chapel steeple. That pierced the horizon. She hadn't come here to find adventure or love. She'd come to survive. The letter tucked into her bag had been written by the Reverend Horace Whitlow himself, desperately seeking a teacher for the Kavanaugh nieces, 17 orphaned girls left in the wake of tragedy. Shelter and small wage provided. Clara had answered the call not out of charity, but necessity. After losing her parents to illness back east and her fiancé to the war between the states, she had nowhere left to go. This was her last chance at building a life of her own. The Reverend met her at the steps of the church. A tall man with a thin build, he smiled kindly but wearily. "You Clara Belle Thatcher?" he asked, squinting. "Yes, sir." "Well then," he said with a sigh, "you're either a blessing sent by the Almighty or a fool about to get eaten alive." That didn't comfort her much. They took a rickety buckboard wagon across town to the edge of the settlement, where the wind picked up and the land turned dry and wide. There, beside a grove of dying cottonwoods, stood the old schoolhouse, faded white paint peeling from its walls, the bell tower leaning like a drunkard. Behind it, in the long grass and weeds, a second building stood, a one-room bunkhouse with a crooked porch and a broken swing. "That's where you'll stay." It was Miss Martha's old house. "The girls sleep in the attic and lofts, Lord help you." And the girls? "They're waiting inside. They ain't been taught much but survival. You're the 5th teacher we've tried. One ran off in the night. One got married just to escape. One drank herself numb and stopped showing up. Last one cried when Joelle, she's the oldest, put a snake in her desk." Clara swallowed hard and nodded. She walked to the door, heart pounding. Inside, laughter echoed faintly, high-pitched, wild, uncontained. She paused, took a breath, and pushed open the door. 17 pairs of eyes turned to her. The girls stood like wolves sizing up an intruder. They ranged in age from about 6 to 16. Dirt-streaked faces, worn hand-me-down dresses, barefoot and wild-eyed. One girl with ginger braids held a slingshot. Another had a kitten clutched under one arm. At the front of the room stood Joelle, tall and sharp-eyed, with a jaw too hard for her age. She didn't blink when Clara entered. Didn't flinch. Clara cleared her throat. "My name is Miss Thatcher. I'll be your new teacher." No one answered. Clara smiled. "Let's begin with names." Joelle leaned on the edge of a broken desk. "What for? You'll be gone by next Tuesday." Laughter rippled through the room, but Clara didn't budge. "Well then, Joelle, I suppose you'll have to be surprised." That earned her a few narrowed eyes and the tiniest smirk from one of the younger girls. Over the next few days, Clara learned just how broken these children were. They were the nieces of the late Martha Kavanaugh, the town's beloved matron whose sprawling ranch had caught fire 3 months ago. Rumor said it was lightning. Others whispered darker things: jealous neighbors, sabotage, revenge from an old family feud. Whatever the truth, Martha had perished, and the girls' nieces she had taken in after the deaths of various kin had been left alone. The town wasn't sure what to do with them. Some saw them as a burden. Others pitied them. A few feared them, calling them cursed or wild like coyotes. The schoolhouse was in shambles. Desks missing legs, chalk broken, slates cracked. There were no books, no supplies, no firewood for the stove. But Clara cleaned it each morning, swept the dust, lit the hearth. She set a routine: letters before lunch, numbers after chores, lessons in respect and scripture before dusk. She was firm but kind. Still, the girls resisted. They mocked her, hid frogs in her tea kettle, stole her boots, drew stick figure caricatures of her with horns. Joelle remained the leader, fierce and watchful. She made no effort to obey. But Clara didn't leave. Each night she wrote in a little brown journal by lantern light. "They are feral, but not lost," she scribbled. "Somewhere beneath the anger is pain. I see it in Joelle's eyes. If I can reach her, perhaps I can reach the rest." She didn't know it then, but someone else had read the reverence. Someone who didn't send a letter. He watched from the ridge above the valley, where the hills sloped gently toward the plains. There, atop a tall black horse, sat Daniel Grant, owner of the Grant Cattle Company, inheritor of 4,000 acres of hard-bought land, and the last of the Grant name. He was a man known for silence, for leaving the town to its business and keeping to his own. But every evening he rode out to the ridge overlooking the old Kavanaugh schoolhouse. He watched the flicker of lanterns, saw the smoke rising from Clara's chimney. He saw the silhouette of the schoolmarm moving among the shadows teaching girls. No one else wanted, and something inside him stirred. A memory, a regret, a wound too deep for words. Daniel Grant knew those girls. He knew every name, and he knew that one of them, maybe more, might carry his blood. But he said nothing, not yet. Clara Belle Thatcher woke with the sun, same as every day since she'd arrived in Dry Hollow. But this morning was different. The cold crept through the cracks in the bunkhouse, and her breath fogged in the air above her journal. Outside, 17. Girls still slept in clusters on cots, blankets, straw mats. Wherever space allowed. Joelle was already gone. Clara found her outside behind the smokehouse, skinning a rabbit. The knife in her hand gleamed. Her eyes didn't even flicker at the sight of Clara. "You're up early," Clara said gently. "You're still here." Joelle replied without looking up. "I told you I wasn't going anywhere." Joelle shrugged and kept working. "We'll see." The rest of the day unfolded like the last. Morning chores, fighting over the water barrel, a stolen biscuit here, a slap over a hair ribbon there. The younger girls still called her teacher lady, like she was some stranger in a storybook. She tried reading aloud to them, Little Women, but they called it stupid, prissy talk. She tried spelling games. They threw the chalk at Clara. Didn't yell. She didn't threaten. She listened. Late one afternoon, while trying to fix a jammed window shutter, she caught the sound of giggling behind the barn. Curiosity led her there, and she found them. 4 girls crouched low, passing. A bottle of something brown and stinging, laughing like women twice their age. One was barely 10. The bottle was almost empty. Clara knelt beside them slowly. "Where did you get this?" One girl smirked. "It was Pa's, before he put May in the well." The laughter died. That night, Clara cried into her pillow. These weren't just unruly girls. They were broken pieces of lives shattered too soon. Some had watched parents die. Some had been tossed from wagon trains or hidden from drunken uncles. One, she learned, hadn't spoken in over a year, but Clara kept teaching, and someone kept watching. From the ridge above, Daniel Grant saw everything. Every stumble, every tear, every moment of courage. He never came close, never spoke, but each day he watched her hang clothes on the line, herd girls into rows for their lessons, carry firewood twice her weight. He noticed the way the girls began to sit still, the way one of the youngest ones tugged at Clara's sleeve instead of biting. Others. He started sending help. First, it was a fresh stack of firewood left beside the bunkhouse one morning. Then a bag of flour and a jar of apple preserves. Then a crate of old but usable books, grammar primers, arithmetic charts, one even signed to Daniel. 1849. Clara was stunned. She asked around. No one in town claimed responsibility. The Reverend smiled but said nothing. One morning she found a pair of brand new boots on her porch. A perfect fit. Joelle eyed them. Someone's got a secret admirer. Clara smiled, but her heart beat fast. She looked up to the ridge, but it was empty. The breakthrough came unexpectedly. It was a Friday. Clara had assigned the girls to write about their best memory. Most scribbled nonsense or refused entirely. Joelle sat with her arms crossed until Clara knelt beside her. You don't have to write about a good memory, she said softly. Just a real one. Joelle stared at her for a long time, then picked up the pencil. That evening, Clara read the essays alone by lantern light. One by one, they peeled back layers of pain. Mama used to sing to me. Then she drank lye by mistake. Or maybe not a mistake. My best memory is when Papa didn't come home and we ate everything in the cupboard and laughed till we passed out. My best memory was a brown horse. I don't remember whose. Joelle's paper was short. My best memory was being held. I was little. I think it was Uncle Dan. Clara paused. Her fingers trembled. Uncle Dan? Could it be? The next Sunday, Clara went to town for supplies. She found the general store's tab already paid. A Mr. left coin. Didn't leave a name, the clerk said. Told me you'd come by, she pressed. Tall man, black coat, wide-brimmed hat? The clerk nodded. You know him? No, Clara whispered, but I think I ought to. Back at the homestead, the girls were learning, slowly, stubbornly. Clara made them recite the 10 Commandments before meals, clean their own messes, take turns with the broom. She stitched dresses out of potato sacks, made chalk out of crushed limestone. The schoolhouse walls began to show signs of life papers tacked up, drawings of horses and trees, and even one picture of teacher lady, with wings, but not everyone was happy. Some townsfolk grumbled. Waste of money, one shopkeeper said. Them girls will grow up thieves like their kin. Another spat. Can't raise wolves into house dogs. Clara heard it all. She smiled, nodded, and went right back to teaching. Then came the day the mayor rode out to see her. He brought papers. Eviction's been filed, he said, half apologetically. Town council voted. The bunkhouses technically on public land. With winter comin', they say the girls should be relocated some orphanage in Wichita. Clara stood frozen. You can't. I'm sorry. You have 2 weeks. That night, Clara stood on the porch alone, eyes on the ridge. The stars were thick overhead. Coyotes cried in the far hills. And from the ridge, a flicker of lantern light answered her. He was there, watching. The nights in Dry Hollow had a way of whispering things the daylight dared not speak. Wind moved through the tall grass like ghosts, brushing against the bunkhouse where Clara lay sleepless. She stared up at the wooden rafters, her mind a battlefield. Of fear, frustration, and something she didn't dare name hope. The town had made it clear. In 2 weeks, the girls would be taken, split up, shipped to strangers or institutions where kindness was as rare as fresh milk in winter. Clara had tried everything: letters to state officials, pleas to the Reverend, petitions with names that vanished when townsfolk got nervous. She needed a miracle. Instead, she got a storm. It began as a dry crackle in the air. The girls were reading aloud from their tattered books Tom Sawyer that week, when the wind slammed the shutters shut like a warning. Clouds rolled over the prairie fast and angry, dark as molasses and full of spite. Joelle looked up from her desk. Smells. Like lightning. Clara moved quickly. Gather the lanterns, shut the windows. No one leaves this room. But it wasn't the schoolhouse that got struck. A fork of lightning tore open the sky and stabbed into the ground behind the bunkhouse, setting the dry grass ablaze. It spread fast, fed by weeks of heat and wind. In seconds, flames licked the wooden porch of the girls' sleeping quarters. Clara ran outside, skirts bunched in her hands, shouting for water buckets. The girls poured out behind her, forming a frantic chain from the pump, but it wasn't enough. Smoke choked the air, and two of the youngest, Becca and Lizzie, were still inside, hiding in the loft, terrified. "Miss Clara!" Joelle screamed. Clara didn't hesitate. She plunged into the smoke, wrapped her shawl around her mouth, and climbed the stairs 2 at a time. Flames danced on the walls, and the roof groaned with heat. She found Becca curled behind an old trunk, coughing. Lizzie clung to her like a shadow. Clara grabbed them both and ran, shielding them with her own body as the ceiling cracked behind her. Just as they reached the doorway, the top beam collapsed. But someone caught her. A powerful arm pulled her out into the night just as the roof caved in. Clara rolled onto the ground, coughing, eyes stinging, and looked up into the shadowed face of a man she'd only seen from afar. Tall, weathered, dusty coat, black hat. Daniel Grant, she gasped. He didn't speak, just nodded and helped the girls to safety. By the time the fire died, the bunkhouse was ash. The schoolhouse had been spared, but barely. The townspeople arrived too late to help, but just in time to witness Daniel standing among the girls like a guardian carved from stone. The Reverend stared in awe. "Never thought I'd see the day." Daniel turned to Clara. "You need a new building," she blinked. "Yes, but I'll pay for every board." She didn't know what to say. Her hands trembled. "Why?" He looked past her toward the girls, huddled together in borrowed blankets, soot on their cheeks and fear in their eyes. "Because I should have done it months ago." The next morning, lumber arrived from his ranch. Carpenters followed. Daniel's ranch hands gruff. Men known more for whiskey than manners built a new home with quiet determination. Within days, a sturdy schoolhouse stood, complete with a sleeping loft, proper windows, and a fresh white coat of paint. The girls watched it rise like it was magic, but questions rose with the walls too. One afternoon, Clara stood beside Joelle, watching Daniel inspect the roofline. Joelle whispered, "You ever wonder why he cares?" "I do," Clara admitted. "Miss Martha used to talk about her brother. Said he was wild once, then quiet for too long. She'd stare at the ridge like she was waiting for him." Clara turned slowly. "Her brother?" Joelle nodded. "She said he loved horses more than people. But that didn't stop people from loving him." That night, Clara found the old family Bible Martha had kept. Tucked between pressed flowers and faded ribbon was a name, Daniel Thomas Grant. Beside it, in Martha's handwriting, "Should anything happen, he knows. He remembers. He owes them everything." Suddenly, it all made sense. The crates of books, the quiet gifts, the visits to the graves. The way he looked at the girls, not with pity, but with memory. He wasn't a stranger. He was family, but he carried a silence, heavier than guilt. She found him the next day near the schoolyard fence, tying a loose hinge with wire. "Mr. Grant," she said softly, "were you planning to tell them?" He paused. "Tell them what? That you're not just helping." His hands tensed. "They don't need me, not the way I am." "You saved them." "I didn't. Not when it mattered." She stepped closer. "They're not asking for perfection. They're asking for someone to stay." He looked at her then. Really looked. The steel in his eyes melted into something vulnerable, haunted. "I can't fix what I ran from." "No," Clara said gently, "but you can build something new. And it starts with telling the truth." The new schoolhouse glistened like a pearl among the dry hills of Dry Hollow, its white painted walls a strange kind of miracle. It stood tall, proud, with a roof that didn't leak, windows that opened smooth, and a wooden porch strong enough to hold all 17 girls at once when they sat there to sing after supper. Inside, Clara hung up a new map of the territories. And Joelle, who once couldn't sit still for more than 5 minutes, now corrected younger girls when they forgot their spelling. Even the most stubborn little ones began writing their names with pride. Something had shifted. Not just in the Tim como just in the po and so jojumo maron girls, but in the town. It was as if Daniel Grant's hammering, his money, his quiet presence had done more than fix a building. It had silenced the whispers. Still, the biggest silence remained his own. Daniel didn't speak of the past. Not to Clara, not to the girls. He showed up in the evenings, usually after supper, helping mend the fence or fix a loose shutter. He'd stay just long enough to hand Clara a fresh jar of jam or a pair of boots for one of the growing girls, then tip his hat and ride back into the dusk. It was clear now to Clara. He was their uncle, or at least some kind of kin to most. She knew it. Joelle knew it. The Reverend knew it too, but no one had spoken it aloud, not even Daniel. One chilly evening, as the girls practiced hymns inside, Clara sat on the porch steps. She watched Daniel approach from the field, his coat flapping like a dark sail in the wind. "Fence posts leaning again," he muttered, kneeling beside her with his tools. "I know," she replied softly. "It always does after the wind comes through." He didn't answer right away. "Just work the post straight with careful hands." Clara looked at him. "Joelle calls you Uncle Dan when she thinks no one's listening." His hands paused. "You gonna tell her she's wrong?" she asked gently. "No," he said after a long silence, "because she isn't." "Then why haven't you told them? Told all of them?" He finished tying off the wire and stood. "Because I don't know if I deserve to." Clara rose too. "They don't want perfect. They want the truth. You knew Martha. You knew these girls before the fire. They remember your shadow more than your voice. That means something." He looked out at the hills where the prairie grass danced gold in the last light of day. "I was 18 when I ran off," he said finally. "Martha begged me to stay, help her raise them after their parents died, my cousins, my blood. I told her I had cattle to break and land to chase. I thought money could fix it later." "It fixed a lot," Clara said. "But not everything," he whispered. "Not the fire, not the years." She stepped closer. "Then fix what you can. Now start with them. They've been waiting for someone to prove they're worth staying for." The next day, something happened that neither Clara nor the girls expected. Daniel came in through the front door, not the back fence, not the ridge. He walked straight into the schoolhouse, boots loud on the new wooden floor. Every girl stopped what she was doing. One dropped her chalk. Joelle stood. "Uncle Dan?" He nodded. "That's right." Lizzie whispered, "You really ours?" Daniel looked at them, all 17 pairs of eyes watching him, some hopeful, some wary, some near. Tears. "I don't know if I'm the man you needed back then," he said. "But I want to be the man who stays now," Becca sniffled. "You're not going away?" "No," he said. "Not again." Clara watched from the corner, heart swelling. The moment had come not in grandeur, but in the simple act of honesty. That evening, Daniel stayed for supper. The girls set the table extra nice, no bickering, no fights. Clara even found a jar of pickled peaches she'd been saving. They laughed. They passed the bread. They told him stories he should have known years ago, who was afraid of spiders, who could whistle like a meadowlark, who missed Martha's molasses cookies the most. Daniel listened. Not like a guest, like family. Later, after the girls were asleep and the dishes done, he stood at the porch rail beside Clara. "I owe you," he said. "You don't owe me a thing," Clara replied. "They're the ones who brought you back. I just happened to be here when you arrived." He glanced sideways. "You stayed when most wouldn't." "I had nowhere else," she admitted. "You could have left, but I didn't." He didn't speak again for a long while. The wind was soft that night. Somewhere an owl hooted. "I used to be scared of them," he said suddenly. "Owls? No. Families. Big ones. People needing you. Depending on you. I thought freedom was silence and distance. Now, I wonder if I was just hiding." Clara's voice was soft. "It takes more strength to be needed than to run." He turned to her. "Would you ever leave?" She looked at him, truly looked. "That depends on whether this place becomes a home." He nodded, slowly, gravely. "Then I guess I've got work to do." He left that night, but not in his usual way. This time he promised to return before breakfast, and he did that every morning after that. For a while it felt like a dream come true. The schoolhouse thrived. The girls began writing in full sentences, singing together on Sundays, even stitching quilts for the coming winter. Clara taught them how to preserve apples, how to read maps, how to write letters, even the kind you never send. And Daniel Grant came every day now, not as a silent rider on a ridge, but as a steady hand fixing doors, mending boots, teaching the older girls to ride the gentler colts from his ranch. He'd even started reading aloud in the evenings, his gravelly voice surprisingly warm as he recited tales from the old Bible or stories from his travels. He wasn't just a man anymore. He was family, at least to the girls. And to Clara, but townsfolk. Don't always like happy endings. It started with the rumors. Some whispered that Clara had gotten too close to the cattle baron. Others claimed she was seducing him to gain his fortune. A few, those bitter with her own failures, insisted she had plans for the girls that weren't proper, or Christian, or civilized. "She's got 'em all dressed like heathens," one woman said in the general store. "One of 'em was running barefoot last week." "I heard she let the older one punch a boy," another gossiped. "Is that schooling or savagery?" "She's playing house with a man too proud to marry and too guilty to leave." It reached the ears of the mayor, who'd never liked the arrangement. So a judge came, not from Dry Hollow, but from Fort Redwood, wearing a clean suit and a heavy frown. Judge Avery Trumbull. He rode in on a black horse and carried a bag full of state orders and county edicts. His boots were polished and his tongue sharper than a branding iron. He stood before the schoolhouse porch with his arms crossed and his judgment ready. "This," he said, waving a paper, "isn't a registered school. It's not a licensed orphanage. These children are scattered relations at best, and there's no legal guardian on file." Clara stepped forward, calm but pale. "They've been here for months, Your Honor. They're thriving." "They're vulnerable," he snapped. "And I've been tasked to remedy that." Daniel rose from the porch rail. "You mean tear them apart?" The judge narrowed his eyes. "I mean relocate them to a certified orphanage in Wichita where proper care can be arranged." "You, sir, are not a legal relative." "I am," Daniel said. "At least to most. My sister was their aunt. She raised them. I was named next of kin. Do you have the documents?" He didn't. Clara searched her satchel. Martha's Bible, she wrote in it. "Named Daniel. That has to mean something." The judge shrugged. "Sentiment doesn't hold up in court. Signatures do." The girls were quiet behind the schoolhouse door, listening. Clara could feel their fear, thick and real. "I'm giving you 30 days, Judge Trumbull said, folding his decree. 30 days to file guardianship papers, provide formal documentation, and register this building as a state certified school. Otherwise, they'll be placed in state custody." Then he rode away, the dust rising behind him like smoke. That night, the schoolhouse was silent. The girls didn't sing. Joelle sat on the stoop, staring at the stars like she might be asking them to save her. Clara came and sat beside her. "We're not giving up, I know," Joelle said. "But what if they don't believe us? They'll believe what they see. And they'll see a family." A few feet away, Daniel stood alone in the dark, staring out over the hills. His jaw was tight, his hands clenched. Clara approached. "You okay?" "No." She waited. "I could have prevented this years ago. I should have filed the paperwork when Martha asked me to. I should have done more than send money. I let her die thinking I wouldn't come back." Clara laid a hand on his arm. "You did come back. Too late. Not for them." He looked down at her. "They're not mine, not legally. Then make them yours, officially." "I don't know how." "Then we learn." The next week was a flurry of activity. Clara, Daniel, and Reverend Whitlow rode to every courthouse in a 60-mile radius, digging up old land deeds, birth records, letters from Martha. They found a notarized document naming Daniel as next of kin. In the event of Martha's death unsigned but witnessed by the Reverend himself. Meanwhile, the girls helped too. They memorized poems, recited history, and practiced spelling. Clara prepared them for inspection, and Daniel began building desks one by one, each carved with a girl's initials. The townsfolk, to Clara's surprise, began coming around. The blacksmith donated a flagpole. The saloon owner sent blankets. The church ladies who once called the girls uncivilized brought pies and mittens. It wasn't charity, it was belief. Then, 2 nights before the judge's deadline, Clara woke to find Joelle missing. She found her out by the graves, Martha's grave and 2 others. Daniel stood nearby, silent, hat in hand. "She was my only real mother," Joelle said, tears on her cheeks. "And he was the only man who ever held my hand when I had a fever, even when I bit him." Daniel smiled gently. "I remember that." Joelle turned. "Don't let them take us." He knelt in front of her. "They won't. Not while I'm breathing." Clara stepped forward. "We stand together, all of us." And they did. Dawn came early on the 30th day. The horizon was pink as Clara smoothed out her only dress, the one with the lace collar Martha once gave her. Behind her, 17 girls stood in a line, their braids neatly tied, boots polished, and hands folded as though they were about to take communion. Daniel rode out just before sunrise, heading to Fort Redwood with Reverend Whitlow and a signed petition from half the town. In his coat pocket were all the papers they'd gathered: letters, birth certificates, affidavits, and that handwritten note in Martha's Bible. He rode fast, not just because the judge's deadline was hours away, but because for the first time in his life, he had something worth racing toward. Back in Dry Hollow, the town waited. Clara stood outside the schoolhouse, looking down the road every 5 minutes. She'd practiced smiles with the girls, taught them to answer questions clearly, had them recite pledges and verses. But she hadn't practiced how to say goodbye. If Daniel didn't make it back in time, no, she wouldn't finish that thought. At noon, the judge returned. He looked the same: clean boots, smug face. Papers ready. Clara stepped forward with the girls behind her like a living shield. "We're ready, Your Honor," he sniffed. "Where's the legal guardian?" She clenched her jaw. "He's on his way." "I don't wait for cattle barons." "You waited 30 years to show up," snapped Joelle from behind Clara. Judge raised an eyebrow. "Charming." Then a sound: hooves, fast, heavy, urgent. Daniel. He rode up, dust trailing behind him like a storm cloud, and he dismounted without a word. He marched to the judge and handed him the satchel full of documents. Judge opened it, then paused. He read, line after line, statement after statement. A deed with Daniel's name, a letter from Martha naming her brother as guardian, a page from the church registry, and finally, a marriage certificate. Clara blinked. "What?" Daniel looked at her, sheepish. I figured if I was going to raise 17 girls with you, I ought to make it official. Her mouth opened, closed. The judge gave a cough. You understand this means the school becomes a legal domestic education unit under spousal guardianship? Daniel nodded. I understand it means they're ours, and they stay. The judge sighed. In all my years, I've never. He looked at the girls, silent, hopeful, some trembling. He sighed again. You have a school. You have custody. You have 30 days to file for accreditation, but I'm satisfied these girls are in good hands. He mounted his horse. God help you all. And he rode off. Clara stared after him, blinking, then turned to Daniel. Marriage? He took off his hat. Just the papers. I didn't want to do anything unless. She kissed him. Right there, in front of 17 gasping girls. Joelle grinned. Wide. Does this mean we're all related now? I reckon it does, Daniel smiled. 2 weeks later, the town threw the biggest wedding Dry Hollow had ever seen. The church bell rang for an hour straight. 17 dresses, some patched. Some borrowed danced down the aisle ahead of Clara as she walked toward Daniel. The girls sang a hymn Martha used to love, and Daniel stood tall in a crisp white shirt, his hat respectfully off for the first time in memory. They exchanged vows under the oak tree by the schoolhouse. The same tree where Clara first read a book. Aloud. Where Daniel first left a note. Where 17 hearts learned what it meant to be safe. The townsfolk cheered. The girls twirled. Clara cried, just a little. And Daniel? He laughed, a deep, hearty, free laugh, like thunder echoing off the canyon walls. Later that night, after the dancing, after the pie, after the girls were tucked in one on each bunk, whispering excitedly about the future, Clara and Daniel sat on the schoolhouse steps. You still watching from the ridge? She teased. He shook his head. No, not anymore. Why? Because everything worth seeing is right here. She smiled. Good answer, Mr. Grant. He looked out across the hills one last time, then took her hand. They sat like that, under a sky full of stars, 17 dreams sleeping safely behind them, and nothing but love ahead.